Welcome back to this 2013 Yamaha YZ450F Revival Series. In the first episode, I bought this bike locked up for $1,000. My initial teardown revealed a loose timing chain, and with the camshafts removed, the engine did cycle over. Looking back at this, my hypothesis that the chain itself was responsible for locking the bike up contradicted itself. While this further teardown was absolutely necessary and the chain is worn out, it is not the lone culprit as I stated it might be in the previous video.
Now this is a conclusion I would have eventually reached on my own, but I didn't have to. I have a lot of smart viewers in the comment section.
And many of you saw immediately that the cam lobes were pointed in directions that clearly showed they are out of time. The slack in the cam chain made me fully aware that I would have to deal with timing,
but I didn't concern myself with that at that moment in time, as I knew it had to come apart anyway.
With this said, the chain on the bottom of the crankshaft was not locking up the engine. The timing being off meant that at some point a valve was open when it shouldn't be, and was more than likely hitting the piston. When I was turning the engine over by hand and asked,
"Stuck valve?" That was the right thought process. So does this change the plan of attack? Not really. But it does mean the camshafts require further inspection. You see, there are two ways this could have jumped time as I understand it. First being, the cam chain was simply worn out and stretched and did jump a tooth or two on one of the cam sprockets. This is the ideal scenario. Scenario 2, which I have seen once on an old KTM 350 and quite a few people in the comments said they've seen on these Yamahas, is that a cam sprocket actually rotated on the camshaft. You see, these cam sprockets are actually pressed onto the camshaft, which is pretty wild, and means that if this sprocket did rotate, there is no way to set timing correctly without fixing this issue. So once again, we're hoping for scenario 1. Guys, I'm calling this bike a revival project, where the goal is to make it run and make it reliable, but I'm not doing a full frame-up build where I throw thousands and thousands of dollars of parts at it. This project is for your average guy with the goal of doing everything right here in my garage. Quick reminder that one of you will take this bike home once it is running and reliable, and you can secure your chance to do so using my link to RockyMountainATVMC.com down below in the description. Every $10 spent on Rocky Mountain secures you one chance to win this bike. The goal is to get this bike in the possession of someone who needs or deserves it, rather than simply selling it when I'm done. The majority of my parts come from Rocky Mountain. They provide a lot of support to the channel, and I do earn commission on your purchases, so that helps make this series possible.
So before we go any further, let's first determine if the camshafts appear to be okay or not. Now, I won't know for certain without actually timing this fully installed, but if a cam gear has rotated significantly, it could be obvious. So taking a look at the manual, here is what top dead center should look like. These dots parallel with the cylinder head and opposing each other, with the cam lobes in this orientation. Placing the camshafts in the cylinder head and comparing, it looks pretty spot on. Considering the state of the cam chain, it wouldn't be surprising if it had just managed to jump time. So, for the time being, we are going to move forward assuming the camshafts are okay unless proven otherwise later on. So let's move on to the next possible problem and point of discussion. Titanium valves can only withstand the abuse they take because of a hard coating that prevents them from deteriorating. Well, more than one person noted that they would be concerned about reusing these valves after I removed the carbon from them with Prime MX wheels, as they think I had likely removed the coating too, which is a valid concern. This specifically is where 4-strokes get tricky.
This is also probably a good time to note I am a garage mechanic who learned from my dad, forums, service manuals, and YouTube videos. I have no formal training, so I'm just taking you through my problem-solving process with this project.
Inside the cylinder head are valve seats, and they are cut perfectly to the shape of the valve face. When the valves are closed, they should be completely sealed to the head. The problem is, brand new valves might not be a perfect match to these valve seats.
You can do what is called lapping valves, where you use a grinding compound and spin the valve in the seat to make those surfaces match. But you cannot do this with titanium valves for the exact reason the comments are already concerned about. Lapping titanium valves removes the hardened coating that allows them to last. The second option is actually cutting the valve seats, but ultimately, it's not a very common DIY job for a couple reasons. It is very precise, difficult to measure, and the tools that'll do the job cost over $1,000. Before I resort to purchasing a seat cutter and cutting new valve seats, let's see if we can rebuild this head reliably without cutting new seats.
I had a past pro supercross and motocross mechanic reach out with his expertise, and I asked him what he thought. He told me he doesn't think those prime wheels would have removed the coating, and that it would be obvious if I took it off. He said if you ever lap a titanium valve, it's very obvious where the coating is removed. I spent some time carefully inspecting each valve, and there are a couple spots around edges where there's a visual distinction between what I think is coated and not coated. After some consideration, I purchased a new set of OEM valves from Rocky Mountain.
From here, I'm going to try something experimental, and if it doesn't work, it's going to require putting this engine together and then taking it back apart. But I'm incredibly curious to find out if it will work, and it will answer the question of if a guy can do this himself reliably without the need to buy a specialty seat cutter tool.
I am going to lap the seats with the old titanium valves, and then install the new titanium valves. This will leave the coating on the new valves perfectly intact, but hopefully make the seats match.
I will fully reassemble the bike and perform a leakdown test. If it fails, I will pony up and spend $1,000 on a seat cutter. All right, are we all clear on the plan of attack? Let's get to work.
We will begin by lapping the old valves in the cylinder head. I added a little bit of valve grinding compound to the mating surface of the valve, which is a gritty compound that grinds these two surfaces to match each other. I placed the valve in the head, putting a little oil on the valve stem itself, and then used this suction cup lapping tool I picked up at the auto parts store to begin lapping. Using a little bit of water helps it suction better as well. Now listen. When I start, you can hear a rough grinding sound. As I lap the valve, that sound gets dull, soft, and smooth. You can see I lift the valve and reset it every so often, and that moves the compound around and makes sure the entire surface is lapped. Once I consistently hear that soft, smooth sound, the lapping is complete. I then removed the valve and cleaned the lapping compound from the head, and you can now see it's a consistent, sort of dull finish. As for the valve itself, Brett was completely right. Clear as day, there is a line on the valve where the coating is totally worn off. Compare this to the other used intake valve, and while it's not so distinct, you can see where the coating is beginning to wear. Replacing these valves was the right choice. I repeated this process for all 4 valves. One more time, here is what it sounds like at initial valve lapping. And here is the sound I was aiming for to tell me lapping was complete. I gave the head a thorough scrub in the sink, as any leftover valve grinding compound will pretty quickly destroy an engine. Now I can get the head reassembled. I have a new top-end gasket kit from YZ450F, which includes a set of 4 new valve seals. These are a pretty simple installation. Sometimes they're a little more firm than this, where you need to push them down with a socket, but I was able to pop these valve seals on by hand. I coated each seal with a little oil. Now I can install the new valves one by one. In the last episode, I noted the valve springs were out of factory spec, so I have 4 new OEM valve springs from Rocky Mountain. These springs have tighter coils at the bottom and more open coils at the top, and the top is indicated by paint in this case as well. I dropped the spring in and then pulled out my Tusk valve spring compressor to install the keepers. This can be slightly tricky to get them to seat, and sometimes involves adjusting the tension on the valve spring or rocking the head a little bit to get them where they belong. But all in all, I actually find installing valves to be quite satisfying. I lubed up the second valve with a little oil, and then repeated the process for all 4. With all 4 brand new valves installed, it was time to do an initial test to see if they are sealed properly. I poured isopropyl alcohol into both the intake and exhaust sides of the head to see if any liquid manages to escape past the valves. It did not, which doesn't mean we're fully in the clear, but is a really good indicator and is confirmation that we can move forward. I installed the valve shims and buckets, and these are the same shims that previously came out of the head, carefully put back in these same spots. Once the engine is together, we can measure valve clearance to see if these need to be adjusted. I then proceeded to install the intake manifold upside down, which I will find out later, and reinstalled the coolant temp sensor. Boom! Cylinder head is rebuilt with brand new valves, springs, and seals. Which means I can start reassembling the top end of this thing. But these mangled radiators are getting replaced anyway, and this will be a little easier with them totally out of the way. That'll do. With the radiators removed, let's move on to the piston. Now, to get this bike running, was a new piston strictly necessary? No, but when you're this far in on an unknown hour bike, you freshen it up. This piston came from YZ450, and a big thanks to YZ450 for supporting this project. You can save 10% on YZ450.com with the code KP10. So step 1 here is measuring ring end gap. Very rarely do I have to file rings, but it does happen. I oiled up the cylinder and the rings and pushed the rings into the cylinder one by one. I measured the ring end gaps using my set of feeler gauges. Alright, so I've got my 2 YZ450 piston rings here, and I just measured the end gap, and the end gap on this one is smaller than the end gap on this one. This says the gap on the second ring should always be larger than the top ring, which matches what the OEM manual says as well, which made me assume that this would be the top ring, but when I look online, a lot of people on forums and videos say that this is the top ring for YZ450. And the rings on the OEM piston are the same width, so I can't use it as a comparison. Considering the 2 rings have different widths, I realized I could determine which is which by the depth of the ring grooves in the piston. I took a sticky note and marked the depth for each groove, which showed that the second groove was deeper and would indeed house that wider ring. I double-checked my end gap measurements, and the top ring was slightly tight per YZ450 spec, but just fine per OEM spec, so I'm leaving that one untouched. The second ring, on the other hand, was a little tight even per OEM spec, so it needs to be filed. There are specialty tools for this, and I believe you're only supposed to file in one direction to avoid any burrs. In this case, I did file in both directions, but when I was finished, I filed all of the edges in one direction to remove any burrs I may have created. I am no expert when it comes to filing rings. From there, I remeasured and was within spec, so I installed the rings on the piston. This YZ450 gasket kit came with 2 base gaskets, so I confirmed their thickness in comparison to the OEM one that came out and ran just one of them. I carefully installed 1 piston circlip on the bench and then installed the piston onto the rod with a bit of oil. I placed a rag in the crankcase for second circlip installation. I sat there about to film showing you how I put these circlips in, and sometimes they are still just so difficult. That took me like 20 minutes and a lot of attempts to finally get this right side in. I think 4 strokes are a little trickier than 2 strokes. A, because I think for most of these bikes, the rod is quite a bit shorter, so you don't have as much room to work with. And B, the clips are thicker, so they're just really hard to compress and actually get in that groove. I have this tool that's from a 2013 KTM 350 where you're supposed to be able to just push the clip in, rotate, and click, boom, just like that. It's not the right size for this, but it was helpful to help locate, and then I just worked my way around it with a screwdriver until I finally got it to pop. But these are tricky, man. Sometimes they just take some time. I'm sure there's people who have the method dialed. They only take me a minute on 2 strokes now, but I still struggle on the 4-stroke circlip sometimes. Piston is installed. Alright, just noticed I made a major mistake that I should have verified. The piston has an arrow that's supposed to go forward. This is universal on pretty much all bikes. The arrow points forward. This bike has a reverse cylinder head design where the intake is in the front, the exhaust is in the back. I just looked at the valve placement on the piston, and the forward arrow is supposed to go backwards. Again, I should have checked. I just assumed that the forward arrow meant forward in all cases, and they had accounted for that with this reverse engine design, but not the case. So piston's got to come out and flip around. I just did a no-no. I reused the same circlip that I popped out to flip the piston. The correct way to do it is those are one-time use. I got it out and it was still completely straight. I got it in and it's seated completely flush to where I wasn't concerned about it. Realistically, I should have gone to the shop and got another circlip, but the piston is now installed backwards, which is correct in this case. With the piston correctly installed, I could now install the cylinder, and this is always tricky on 4-strokes. I very carefully compress each ring one by one with my hand, ensuring the cylinder gets smoothly over each side of the ring. I lubricate the cylinder, piston, and rings with plenty of oil for this. Compared to a 2-stroke, there is a lot more resistance because that compression ring has some force behind it. And now, engine assembly can continue with a brand new cam chain from YZ450F. Alright, on to the fun stuff. Let's time this thing. This engine has a marking on the flywheel that indicates top dead center, or rather 23 degrees after top dead center. For whatever reason, this generation Yamaha sets timing and measures valve clearance here. Now, does this change anything? No, but it's just interesting, as I've never seen another bike that isn't timed exactly at top dead center. That said, I aligned it at the correct mark and then installed the camshafts, and as shown at the start of the video, aligned them based on setting the dots parallel to the cylinder head. The first couple times I did this on a 4-stroke, I thought it was insanely tricky, but you get the hang of it. For the intake cam, I was initially a couple teeth off and just carefully bounced the chain off the cam and rotated by a tooth at a time until I had them properly aligned. I will show you alignment in a moment once I have these bridges and the tensioner installed. For everything in a 4-stroke top end, generously apply oil. I installed and torqued the bridges to spec, and now it's time to reinstall the tensioner. This tensioner works by winding it up clockwise with a flat blade to retract tension. There is a special tool that allows you to lock it here, but I don't have that tool. I carefully installed the tensioner without letting that screwdriver slip, and once tightened, released the screwdriver and the tensioner expanded into the cam chain guide. Now, when I apply pressure to the chain, it is tight, unlike when I first pulled this bike apart. And here is a look at the timing, with both the intake and exhaust camshafts aligned perfectly parallel to the cylinder head. And now, the real moment of truth. Remember at the beginning how I said the cam gears could have spun? Well, when I cycle the engine over, if there is an issue with the cams, the chain is either going to jump teeth or it's going to move itself out of time. It did not, which once again means we are moving forward and it's time to measure valve clearance. When you hear people say their 4-stroke needs a valve adjustment, this is what they're talking about. With my feeler gauges, I measured valve clearance by sliding the feeler gauges under the cam lobes using the specs from the manual. And I found that one of each intake and exhaust valves were slightly too tight, while the other 2 valves were in spec. Too tight means the correct size feeler gauges could not slip under the cam lobes. We are aiming for an intake valve clearance of 0.1 to 0.15 millimeters, and an exhaust valve clearance of 0.2 to 0.25 millimeters. This varies bike to bike and will be specified in the manual. The tight intake valve measured 0.9 mil and the tight exhaust valve measured 0.18 mil. Now we disassemble. The tensioner and camshafts need to be removed once again to access those valve shims. So I first pulled the intake camshaft and then used a magnet to pull that bucket, and the shim came with it. I remember the first time I ever did a valve adjustment was with my brother in 2018, and I was terrified. I said, "What do you mean we're going to touch the engine?" Here we are, 2026, ain't no thing. All we're doing is altering the height of this shim to fix the clearance. I used a micrometer here, a caliper works as well, but this shim is 2 mil thick. Shims come in 0.05 mil increments, so to increase our clearance from 0.09 mil, we're going to decrease the shim size to 1.95 mil. Now, shims are always worth measuring too because there is slight variation. This 1.95 mil shim actually measured 1.96, which is fine, and should put our clearance at 0.13 perfectly in the middle of spec. I installed the new shim and the bucket, followed by the camshaft, and then repeated the process for the exhaust valve out of spec. it had a 2.05 mil shim in it, so we will reduce it to a 2 mil shim to increase that valve clearance. What do you know? We have a 2 mil shim from the intake side. I repeated the exact same assembly process from a few minutes ago and re-measured valve clearance. As expected, all 4 valves are in spec and it's time to continue assembly. I use a very small amount of oil-resistant gasket maker on these surfaces here. Some manuals recommend it, and it just makes sure you're not going to leak oil here. Now we have a small continuity error here, as you weren't yet supposed to see this sick bling cover from Tusk, as we need to rotate the engine back to the timing mark to perform a leak down test.
Alright, this is a really tricky task with one person, because as soon as I connect the leak down tester, it tries to spin the motor over, which is going to take it away from top dead center and show a lot of leakage. I don't have enough hands for this. We're going to try just standing on this ratchet and hope that that's enough pressure. I kind of doubt it will be, but let's give her a whirl. Oh, yeah, see, so it's still rotated a load. Alright, so as soon as I'm connecting the tester right now, it's forcing the motor over because there's tons of pressure going into this engine, and there's not really a good way to lock this thing at top dead center, so this is going to be a tough one without an extra set of hands. Alright, got the 12-point socket on the breaker bar attached to the peg. That should hopefully do it, and we're within like 1 degree of top dead center. Oh, Jesus! Holy okay, under the peg. That's so much force, dude. It was looking really promising for a minute there. I didn't actually get to see it before it popped. This is the trickiest time I've ever had a leak down test, because most bikes will stay at top dead center. Problem is, this is not measured at top dead center. It's measured at 23 degrees after top dead center. All right, so let's try this again. Extra Uggy Duggy action. We're getting real Western here. This is sketchy as hell, dog. Always professional. Let's give this another go. 5%. That is a healthy engine. Feel nothing coming out of the intake. I feel nothing coming out of the exhaust. There's just a little bit of air coming out right here. And a tiny bit coming out of the breather, which is exactly what we want. Boom! We're running this thing. Hell yeah, let's go. All right. Crap. I put the manifold on upside down like a dipshit. Okay, manifold is fixed. Crisis averted. Come on. There it goes. We're dialed. You go there. Sparky. Bada boop.
No wonder I have jaw problems, as I seem to try to solve my mechanical tasks at hand by moving my mouth. But by now, I was getting incredibly close to trying to start this bike, and as mentioned earlier, I did replace the radiators with some cheapos from eBay. OEM radiators were pretty pricey, and these eBay radiators function perfectly well. They just tend to be a little soft. So, let's protect them. Radiator guards or braces are a staple on pretty much all of my bikes, except the Stark, of course, as radiators are the most vulnerable part on the bike in my opinion. Now, upon searching for radiator guards for this bike, I was coming up with nothing until I looked on MxLocker, and what do you know, I found a set of Duval braces for the 2010 to 2013 YZ450F. While many of my parts come from Rocky Mountain, every now and then there's a specific part for a specific bike that I can't find. And in cases like this, MxLocker has been an awesome resource. From used parts and gear to new parts like this that are just hard to find, MxLocker should be added to your bookmarks for where you look when you're in need of something specific. As someone who works on lots of bikes and ends up with leftover parts, MxLocker has replaced eBay for me when it comes to selling parts as well. In fact, I have a handful of items for sale on my MxLocker profile and just shipped out an old KTM front wheel last week. I have a ton more parts waiting to be listed, so if you want to check out my profile, it'll be linked below. You can save $10 on your first MxLocker purchase using the code KP10, and you can visit mxlocker.com or download the app today.
Oh yeah, baby.
And by now, there were just a few things left to button up before the first start attempt, including the rear brake pedal,
Pin in the back of this brake bolt, bada boom.
followed by the airbox, which I did indeed clean and ensure there was no dirt inside, the fuel tank, and finally, I added coolant. I run AutoZone 50/50 in almost all of my bikes unless I know the bike is going to get super hot, such as a hard enduro scenario, in which case I run Evans.
All right, it is certainly not done yet, but I think it runs. I feel pretty good about the problem solving, the solutions. I feel thorough about my work. We're gonna cycle this thing over a few times and see if it fires up. Let's do it.
Get some oil moving through this motor with all those fresh components. We got plenty of compression. We'll give her 5 or 6 more. I don't know if it's gonna want the high idle or not, but here goes. I haven't kicked a 450 in a long time. I need a boot. Take 2, high idle on. Let's go! Let's go, baby. She's back. Sounds good.
We're gonna call that an episode. Like I said, still plenty to do to get this thing finished and absolutely ready to ride, and I'm excited to throw a leg over this 2013 YZ450F, because obviously I gotta ride this thing and make sure it works properly before it goes to one of you guys. It's been started one time so far, so that doesn't really prove anything for the longevity of these valves, but based on all of my reading and research, along with that Leakdown test, I feel really good about this, and I think this bike is going to be solid and reliable as is. So every $10 you spend on Rocky Mountain using my link below or on screen will get you a chance to win this bike. The official rules are down in the description as well. There's been a little bit of confusion on this, and I've gotten some emails. Guys, when you go to Rocky Mountain, it's gonna bring you to my page with my recommendations, but once you've clicked that link, you can buy anything on the site, and I have seen those affiliate orders coming through, so don't worry, it is working. Now, there is a lot going on right now. Totally separately, I have my Stark Varg EX giveaway going on, and that goes through the end of March. Someone will win my Stark Varg EX and a trip to Montana to come ride Starks with me. To enter for that, you can head over to my website and pick up any merch or direct entries for that bike. So your Rocky Mountain orders will get you entered to win this Revival project, which will be a solid running bike ready to ride, but it's not going to be a perfection build, and entries on my website will get you entered to win the Stark Varg EX build. Honestly, I am stoked. Getting this bike back up and running has been the culmination of a lot of knowledge I've gained over the last 5, 6, 7 years wrenching on dirt bikes. And I am thrilled that I was able to seemingly accurately diagnose and fix the problem on this machine. Thank you guys so much for watching. Your support truly means the world to me, and I will get cracking on episode 3.
Let's go!